Bitcoin is going to zero within a decade. This is according to Eugene Fama, American economist and Nobel laureate, sharing his thoughts about the cryptocurrency on the Capitalisnt podcast in January. So, shortly after this, I made a piece critiquing his thoughts, breaking down his arguments, and I, in a nutshell, think he's wrong about what he has to say regarding Bitcoin. So, one of his first concerns about the flagship crypto is he claims cryptocurrencies violate the rules of a medium of exchange. There's been a lot less volatility than in its early days, so it has been more attractive, relatively speaking, as a medium of exchange. However, if the volatility really concerns someone, they can easily switch from Bitcoin into fiat. When it comes to international payments, cryptocurrencies are still cheaper, faster, and they can be done without an intermediary. That's one of their major draw cards. Some of you would say, well, what about stable coins? I mean, they can be sent very quickly and efficiently as well, anywhere in the world. And yes, they can, but you're still relying on a third party. And almost all of the stable coins are being issued and managed by massive companies. So Tether and Circle being the two largest ones at present. And they could easily intervene and stop transactions if they wanted to, especially if government forces them to do that. As more people enter the space, there won't be as much volatility. Now, in terms of other concerns regarding Bitcoin's idea as a medium of exchange, acceptability, yes, very few merchants directly accept Bitcoin, but there's a very convenient workaround. You can get Bitcoin credit cards, and the issuers can readily convert from BTC into fiat. I get it, you're still relying on fiat to conduct the transaction. Do bear in mind, Bitcoin is still a relatively young network. It's the same with Ethereum and altcoins. Over time, you will get more direct Bitcoin acceptance. For example, Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Block Inc., behind Square, that the company will be adding Bitcoin payments to the terminals or their network. The next point, divisibility and transaction cost. Now, Bitcoin and Ethereum for micropayments, yes, if you do them directly on their chains, they're still expensive. When it comes to going via a layer 2, particularly with Ethereum, you have all sorts of options. That's another workaround. Eventually, we will have an efficient system where you can conduct micropayments on Bitcoin or Ethereum. It will take time. Just like the internet in its early days, the infrastructure was terrible. Now it's hundreds or thousands of times better than before. The same will apply to Bitcoin. Divisibility, I don't agree with this one because you have 100 million Satoshis in one Bitcoin. And it's the same with cryptocurrencies at large. So that's not an issue. Portability and durability, yes, these wallets are prone to loss and theft. And if you're going via a centralized provider, there is the concern that these companies could collapse. If you're going through a reputable service, that's less likely. If you've got a non-custodial wallet, you eliminate that risk. And with recovery seed backups and all the other backups you could implement, your currency is still pretty safe. I don't see that as being a valid argument. Now, beyond the idea of using cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange, look, eventually it could be an inflation hedge compared to gold. You've also got utility tokens, highly portable censorship-resistant assets, to name a few. On to other points. So Fama pointed out his preference for gold, covering its use cases or its intrinsic value derived from the scarcity, utility, and all of its properties. There was a point in this podcast, and something that really stuck out, when Bethany McLean, the co-host, said, "Is that then the core of the argument? Does it have to have a use to be valuable?" When you look at expensive art, high-end real estate, which in some places, in certain situations, it's overpriced, and particular collectibles, I wouldn't say that the asset's value is derived from its utility. I mean, when you have collectible cards selling for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, I think that's completely insane. But some people could justify that. So again, the lack of intrinsic value does not discount Bitcoin at all. And let's be honest, the US dollar does not have intrinsic value. Someone tried challenging that by saying, oh, it's used as the world reserve currency, it's used for paying taxes and all goods and services. But in that case, that's a unit of account, or you could use it as a medium of exchange. That still doesn't mean it has intrinsic value. Unlike gold, real estate, oil, and other commodities, it's ridiculous to assume that the US dollar does have intrinsic value. But as a store of value, we know the US dollar has been devalued considerably over the decades, and we had trillions of dollars being printed around the pandemic. And eventually the money printer will be turned back on. This inflation that's contributing to even more devaluation of the US dollar, one of various factors, but a major one. And on top of that, you've got global debt just getting out of hand. Now, at the time of writing, for those not looking at the screen, the US national debt is close to $38.2 trillion. That's nearly 97% of the public debt to GDP ratio. And across the world, look, it's just as bad, if not worse. This is why some people do see Bitcoin as a suitable store of value. Now, the next topic of discussion, a 51% attack. Very hypothetical, but in reality, it's almost impossible. Not just my words. Take the advice from Andreas Antonopoulos, who is a Bitcoin and open blockchain expert. This was a video he posted 10 years ago now. Someone in the audience asked him, are you worried about a 51% attack? Not only has it become increasingly difficult to carry out, it is almost impossible to sustain. It's not practical to sustain. You would be better off just contributing time, energy, and resources to mine the Bitcoin and get rewards. And something that many people don't understand or just ignore is a higher Bitcoin hash rate leads to a more secure network, at least when it comes to mining. Different when it comes to node distribution and decentralization. I'll touch on that shortly. But when you want to ensure that the network is very robust, or for new blocks entering Bitcoin's blockchain, this high hash rate is very good, and it makes it even less likely that someone could carry out a 51% attack. But what's more important, we need to look at the number of individual computers with a copy of Bitcoin's blockchain, so these nodes. You need to look at where they're distributed and how many of them there are. So at the time of recording, we have 22,300 reachable nodes, according to this BitNodes live map. Not only do the rogue actors need to have majority control of the hash rate, but even when they propose a new block, the node operators, or those with full nodes, they can easily reject any invalid blocks. In regards to Fama's argument about a 51% attack, it's still likely for smaller blockchains using proof of work, or I guess even proof of stake. But when it comes to Bitcoin and to a lesser extent Ethereum, it's almost impossible for this to occur. So I'm going to call BS on that. And when you consider that Bitcoin has a 99.99% uptime and a perfect uptime since March 2013, I'm not sure how much more convincing people need in terms of how robust and decentralized the network is. There's the other elephant in the room, as I like to call it. It's impossible for Bitcoin to go to zero because we have millions of lost Bitcoin or inaccessible coins because of discarded hard drives and all holding the private keys. If they can't be accessed, you can't sell the crypto. Now, there will come a point in time where quantum computing will be able to break the cryptography behind Bitcoin's encryption, access those Bitcoin or the private keys, and sell the assets. But that's a completely different topic of discussion. That's not something that will happen for at least 8 or even 10, possibly 15 years. We don't know, but I'll include a separate article going into further detail about that. And these are the reasons why I don't think Bitcoin is going to zero within a decade. I believe it will continue its trend upwards, which leads me to the market update. Now, this is the state of play. Bitcoin has dropped further since yesterday. It actually went down to 94,000, but it's now sitting at around 96,200. Looking at the biggest cryptos here, I mean, it's down across the board except for Zcash. That has been on fire. I mean, geez, and that's had a very volatile week as well. It went down to around $450, but my goodness, has it reclaimed, or has it just bounced back? That's been one of the success stories for the latter part of this year. That's a wrap for today. Thank you for tuning in. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.